Hey, good morning, everyone. So I figured maybe you guys want to go with me for a ride to work. Yesterday, I was talking with Ray from Motormouth Radio. Check him out. He's a really cool guy. The first time I ever actually spoke to him. We had a pretty good conversation. We talked about a bunch of different things. And one thing that we're both New Yorkers, technically. He's from Long Island. I'm from White Plains, New York, originally. Actually, I'm originally from Sweden, but I grew up in White Plains, New York. And we were just talking about different people from the area and stuff like that. And he asked me, who's another person that I watch on YouTube? And I told him Uncle Tony's Garage. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it. You should be. If you're not, you should be familiar with it. Anyway, Tony DeFeo, actually, I will say he was probably a pretty good influence on me in my younger days. And one thing that really got me into street cars and stuff like that, like I already was, but not that big, this came out. That right there, that's Tony DeFeo. This is from 1987. I still got the magazine. That right there, when I saw that come out, I had to get a 5-liter Mustang. So I saved my pennies, and the very next year, I had to save my money. Very next year, I went and I bought a 1988 Mustang LX 5-liter 5-speed. And I just happened to go into this one dealership in Mount Kisco, New York. They're not there anymore, but I asked them, do you have a stripper Mustang? Amazingly enough, they actually had one. And it was a red coupe. It had 0 options. It had no options whatsoever. Radio delete, no AC, manual windows, manual locks, the whole 9 yards. Oh, no, wait. No, it did have power locks. It did have power locks. That was the only option that it did have on it. I mean, it was a stripper. Of course, I get the thing, and I did a reading magazines and stuff like that, because back in the day, you had magazines. You didn't have internet. That's how you learned how to do things. And I remember reading on tricks and stuff that other people were doing to get more power out of their Mustangs. And so what I wound up doing was I set the timing. I advanced the timing quite a bit, which helped an awful lot. I mean, amazing amount. I did that. I set the TPS. I moved the air intake temperature sensor from the intake manifold off into the air box. What a huge difference that made, too. I never actually took that car to the drag strip, and I'll explain why. I would take the car down Central Avenue in Yonkers, New York. And going down there one night, there was a Mustang convertible there. And we wound up lining up at a traffic light. And his car sounded healthy. I don't know what was done to it. Light turns green, we go. And he's laying rubber like non-stop, and I launched the car really good. I took him definitely off the line. By the time we got to a point where we had to slow down for the next light, we were about dead even. Okay, so I could see he was like, dang, what the heck just happened? I didn't know who it was at the time. So that light turns green, because we stopped for a traffic light. That light turns green, same exact thing. He could not catch me off the line. And I just knew how to launch the car. I'd practice it over and over and over again, although, like I said, I never got to the track. So at the next traffic light, he's like, hey, he starts yelling at me. He goes, what did you do to that thing? I said, absolutely nothing. It's stock. He's like, no way. There is no way that car is stock. I've done this, that, the other thing. Stuff that was available at the time. He had work done to his car. I said, no, the car is stock. He absolutely did not believe me. Light turns green, we go again. Same result. This time, Yonkers PD. We got nailed. Street racing. So, when all was said and done, the officer told me I could leave. And he says, you're lucky. He goes, I've never seen you around here before. Never seen you do this before. I got caught later on, too, doing something, but that's another story. So he tells me that the guy behind me was getting towed. I was like, oh, okay. I guess he must have been notorious for street racing. A period of time goes by, and somebody says to me, hey, were you racing this convertible on Central Avenue? I said, yeah. He's like, that's Jason, I believe it's Batuarda was his name. And I was like, okay. He goes, yeah, he's the hot thing down there. He goes, and he was really mad because he couldn't beat you. I was like, okay. Those of you that know 5-liter Mustang world from back in the day, that was Racing Jason. He wound up the same car. He wound up with the fastest Mustang convertible Fox body in the world back then. I mean, it was turboed. I might have been twin turbo. I don't recall, but there's many pictures of it from back in the day. Just kind of interesting when you sit there and think about it now. But because of that race and because of us getting pulled over, my insurance at my age went through the roof. I couldn't afford the car anymore. I could barely afford the payments. Now I couldn't afford the car because I couldn't afford the insurance. Talking to my insurance agent at the time, she had told me, well, your choice is if you got to get rid of the car or something, or pay the loan off so you don't have to have full coverage, which I couldn't afford to do that. So what I wound up doing was I actually traded that in, and I bought a Ford F-250 that was brand new at the time with a plow. And I had used that for a while, made some money with that, and eventually got rid of that. The funny thing about the Central Avenue story is a little bit later on, several years later, many years later, when I had my own shop, I had purchased a wrecked Mustang from an auction. So I had it sitting there. There was an auction at a wrecking yard in Liberty, New York, and I went there, and there was a brand new Mustang LX 5-liter that was hitting the side hard. It had 1,700 miles on it. It was an automatic. And so I was like, okay. I won the bid. I forgot what I paid for it. It was like $1,300, $1,400. And so I got the thing back to the shop. I took it apart, and I had the engine and transmission sitting in the corner of the shop. My dad had an 82 Volvo 240 turbo wagon. He had some issues with it. I don't recall what it was, and I had to pull the motor out of that car. So I pulled the motor out, and I had the motor hanging on the hoist, and in the background I could see the 5-liter sitting there. And I'm looking and I'm like, huh. So I pulled the tranny out of the Volvo, and then I took the 5-liter and I stuck it in the Volvo, and it never came back out. And I hooked it up. I had it working with fuel injection and everything else. And that car was a sleeper. That car could go a 1350 at the track. At the time, you got to remember, at the time, that was a fast car. 1350 was a fast car. Most street cars, were 14, 15 second cars. So a 1350 out of a Volvo, I got video of it where at Englishtown, and the announcer was, because I was racing a Corvette at one point, and the announcer was saying, "What a kind of Corvette's got to be embarrassed by the Swedish muscle car." Pretty funny stuff. But anyway, back to the Volvo. Again, I was on Central Avenue in Yonkers, and I pulled up to the light next to a Corvette, new Corvette at the time. Light turns green, and he didn't realize what was in the car. The car had a single exhaust too. I wanted it to be quiet on purpose. So, light turns green, we go, and it's like I stayed just ahead of him the whole time, and eventually, he nails it because he's like, why the heck is this Volvo ahead of me? Get to the next traffic light, he's like looking over at me. So I'm not even looking at him. My buddy Tim is in the passenger seat. Light turns green, we go. Now he's trying. He can't beat me. So next traffic light, you can see him like getting all ready and stuff like that. Light turns green, we go. And we are neck and neck. He can't beat me. Again, we got pulled over for street racing. And, but that car, my dad actually drove that car, which surprised me. He drove that car for well over a year, and he put 100 miles a day on the car commuting. I was at my parents' house with him after we'd taken it to the strip, and I had street slicks on the back. My parents' neighbors, the neighbor, the kid, he had a Mustang that he was working on. He was doing all sorts of work to it, and he had no idea what he was doing. And he pulls the thing out in the street, and he goes to do a burnout. He does a burnout, it was okay, nothing spectacular. So I pull the Volvo out in the street. Now, I had welded the spider gears together on the rear, so it was a locker. My dad wasn't driving it at this point in time. I pretty much made it into like a strip car, street racer type thing. So I backed the Volvo out in the street, and I annihilated the street slicks. And it left the most beautiful burnout up the street. And the neighbor was looking like, "You've got to be kidding me." So he came down and he looked at it and he realized what I did. At that time, I never took it to track at that point, but at that time I actually had ported stock heads, ported stock intake, 65mm throttle body, stuff like that. But anyway, I thought I'd share that with you. I thought that was a fun story. So, like I said, check out Uncle Tony's Garage on YouTube. He's a cool guy. Hopefully I can meet him one day. I've been following him since I was a kid, and it's funny to know he wasn't much older than me when he did the magazine. All right. Anyway, that's it. Hopefully you got something out of that. If you did, hit that like button. I hope you like my stories. I get people that message me all the time saying, "Tell me more stories. We like the stories." So there you go, another story. All right, guys. That's it for now. Have a great day. Keep wrenching.